prioritization, like I was so used to like, it was me, myself, and I had all the time in the world and I could focus on whatever I want. And then you get married and then you have kids and you realize, ooh, I have, I'm spread a lot more thin. I have a lot more things to focus on. And I know you realize that you've got 3 kids yourself. And so it was more about just being very efficient with our time and realizing that like, I have less time, but what's funny is now I would say that I'm way more performant and efficient with that time than I ever was before, because I didn't really value my time. I had as much of it as I wanted. Whereas now I'm like, this is me time. This is when it starts. And this is when the me time stops. And I have to get as much done in between this time as I can, because after that I have to kind of shut it off and focus on my wife and, kids and all that other stuff too. So I think it just comes down to like efficiency and making sure that you're like making every second count.
Well, welcome to the show. Nathan Newberry, your host. I have Bryce Matheson here on our call today. Super stoked to have him. He is an expert in so many arenas in real estate and in finance, and we're looking forward to hear his whole success story and just understand what you do. Starting off, Bryce, tell us a little bit about like the definition of what high performance means to you, what that really kind of does and applies to your ethos.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an excellent question, by the way. Very good question. In my opinion, high performance is starting and never stopping. And that sounds so basic. And I think that holds true for pretty much everything in life. Like I've just found that like anything you do, it's not necessarily about the intensity. It's just about that consistency. And so for me, the high performance is just like setting that goal that's far enough out, but you know that it's at a pace that you can achieve, and you're without a doubt that you're going to get there because it's something that's attainable. But if you do those small, simple things every single day, you're going to get there.
Yeah. And then tell us a little bit about what you do. Like help us give a bird's eye view of like how you've gained the success and what you do to help people.
Sure. Yeah. So we're, I've dabbled in probably a little bit of everything, and it sounds like you have too.
You're a normal entrepreneur if you weren't.
Yeah, I'm like, ooh, shiny. Like let's go try that one. But right now our bread and butter is real estate, and I've done a lot of different things in the past. Like I've done some SaaS, some software. I've tried some product businesses, things like that. But real estate was one of those things that I kind of like tripped and fell into, and for whatever reason, it seemed to just stick, and we were, the most profitable and most successful with that one. And so we leveraged that and we took it and we ran with it. And 7, 8, 9 years now, we're still with it and plan to be so for the next, hopefully, decade at least.
Amazing. Well, tell us, bringing it back to the very beginning. I feel like we're always kind of wired to be a little crazy with being risky in a sense of being an entrepreneur, but like help us bring it back to the very beginning of like when you kind of like had that awakening understanding that you were a little bit different in how you kind of managed and kind of thought through that whole strategy.
Yeah. So I've known, and people have told me that I'm a little bit eccentric, but I've known since I was a little kid, like always been an entrepreneur. I like, have you ever seen those big tubs of like Red Vines licorice that you can get at Costco? Oh, yeah. So when I was 7 years old, I went to Costco and bought one of those. And then I took 5 pieces of licorice, individually wrapped them up in saran wrap, and I sold them on the playground for, 25 cents a piece. And that was how I earned the money to buy my first TV or whatever I was saving up for at the time. So like, I think some people are just wired with it and you can't turn it off. And I think I'm very much that way. Like I've always had that drive. I've just loved like systems and processes and building things that just grow organically. It's just, I don't know, it's just exciting to me. So I think I don't want to say that it's not something you can develop, because I don't believe that at all. But I do think that some people just like intrinsically deep down, just some people have it and some people don't. So I don't say that to be discouraging, but I feel like I've been one of those people who's lucky enough to just like have this drive and to push and kind of just have that entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah. I had a similar understanding of that, like the very beginning. But I remember specifically when it turned on for me was when my wife came to me and said, "Hey, I'm pregnant and you better get your crap together or go get a job." And it was awakening realization like, oh gosh, I got to get serious about this. I can't be freelancing or a wannabe entrepreneur. I got to get really clear. But man, yeah. And then you dabbled in so many things. Like, what made you really land on real estate, or you kind of found that as kind of like the stride of success with what you've been doing?
Yeah. So I followed the pretty traditional route. Like I think there's this like, maybe like pride or ego thing among like entrepreneurs that like, oh, I was a dropout, or like I was never that. Like I was a pretty straight-laced kid. Like I didn't have issues with like drugs or alcohol in high school, and like like I graduated high school and then I went to college and I got a big boy job and I just kind of followed like the normal path, right? And so once I graduated, I got my first like big boy job out of college. And for whatever reason, I just kind of like had it in my head that like, okay, I now have this big boy job. Now it's time to get the big boy house. And that was like the whole extent to it. So I was like, I guess it's time to buy a house. So bought a house. At the time I was living with a couple of roommates in an apartment. And so I was like, oh, this is great. You'll just move into my house with me. You'll pay me rent. And this is a great scenario for all of us. So we did that. We had my buddies move in with me and did that for about 2 years. 2 years later, and mind you, at this time, like I still wasn't really in real estate. Like I was just living in a house. Like I wasn't like doing anything with it specifically.
Had your rent paid for you. You had your mortgage
exactly.
paid
Yeah,
for
it was
you.
a win-win. Like absolutely. Yeah. So two years later, life looked very different. Like I was engaged, about to get married. And so my wife actually, or my soon to be wife at the time, she had a house as well. And so we ended up selling my house, moving into hers. And, when we sold that house, I remember, like very vividly walking out of the title company with a check for $40,000. And, coincidentally enough, that $40,000 was exactly what I was making at my W-2 job. And I remember that is when the light bulb moment happened for me, because I was thinking, oh, wow, like I didn't really do anything to make this money. But at my job, I had to slave for an entire year to make the same amount. So it was kind of like I tasted the blood in the water. Like that was kind of the first catalyst that set it all off. We're like, okay, if I made this much from one house, what would happen if I did 10 houses? And that's just how it started.
And granted, when people think that you had a $40,000 check, it's not because the housing market was only $40,000 that you sold the house at. And I think people think that, like, man, where in the world can you buy a $40,000 house? I mean, it's
no.
I'll go scoop up a bunch there,
Exactly. Yeah. So no, it worked out. It was great. And so that was kind of like the catalyst that just kind of led us into the next one. So we took some of the proceeds. I had some student loans. It wasn't crazy. It was maybe like 15,000 or so. I had a little bit of credit card debt, but after paying all that off, I think we had $15,000 or $20,000 left over. And so we used that to buy our first like official rental property with, no tenants living with us. And then it just kind of snowballed from there, and we moved on to flipping and lending and a couple of the things that we're doing now. Yeah. But that's, those are the baby steps. That's how it started.
Where did that obsession start? Was it a book, a conference, a course? What kind of started spinning your wheels of the education and understanding how to get into that? Yeah,
I don't think there was necessarily like, I think that came after the fact. Okay. I think that I like tripped and kind of fell into real estate, and like it worked out for us. And it wasn't until I saw that I was like, oh, okay, now I need to go learn more. And I think that's abnormal. I think a lot of people like kind of have this like, they're all about reading and studying and reading the forums and talking to mentors and do all these things, but they never actually take that leap. And we kind of did it backwards. Like we took that leap and then we're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And then you can go and study. But I personally, I like that perspective better, because you don't know what you don't know. And so I think a lot of people talk about, like, I know you've been in sales before, like you could read 20 books on sales, but until you take your first sales call,
Right.
you're going to learn so much more from that first call. And then once you have that experience, that taste, then you can go back and start reading on tactics and sales and closing frameworks and all the different things. Yeah. And now you have that background and that experience to really jump off of.
Yeah. What were some things that you had to apply as you're growing? What were some principles or habits you had to install, or things that shifted from being from college to being married to being a high performer like yourself? What's have been some of those things that you've had to learn along the journey that's helped you arrive at the success that you've been at now?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, or the one that comes to mind first, is really just like prioritization. I was so used to like, it was me, myself, and I had all the time in the world, and I could focus on whatever I want. And then you get married, and then you have kids, and you realize, I have, I'm spread a lot more thin. I have a lot more things to focus on. And I know you realize that you've got 3 kids yourself. And so it was more about just being very efficient with our time, and realizing that like, I have less time, but what's funny is now I would say that I'm way more performant and efficient with that time than I ever was before, because I didn't really value my time. I had as much of it as I wanted. Whereas now I'm like, this is me time. This is when it starts, and this is when the me time stops. And I have to get as much done in between this time as I can, because after that I have to kind of shut it off and focus on my wife and, kids and all that other stuff too. So I think it just comes down to like efficiency and making sure that you're like making every second count.
Well, did you have to study that yourself, or was that just kind of like trial and error of like learning it on the go?
Yeah, I don't know that I ever like, I don't know if there was any material necessarily where I learned that. A lot of it was just trial and error. And I'm like, yikes. Like I know you've blinked before in the past, and like, where did the day go? And like, you don't even know what you did or didn't accomplish, And so now it's like, okay, I have this much time, this much energy to devote, and I have to get these tasks done, or I need to learn to delegate it. And that's another skill in and of itself, but like, yeah, it just comes down to like learning, like, I have these goals. I want to achieve this, but I only have so much time. How am I going to get there?
If you had to give an elevator pitch of a presentation of like, in a way of the key things that have made you successful, or that would help you in understanding real estate, like, and you were going to tell someone in a few sentences or a minute or two, what would you say that was the most important thing that you've learned in your skill to get
when it comes to real estate? The number one thing that I wish I could go back and tell myself is use other people's money.
Okay.
Like so here's kind of like the traditional path for most real estate investors. Like, you start to dip your toes in the water. You're like, okay, I'm going to buy a rental property. And then, you know what? You're like, okay, I've got this rental property. It makes $300 a month. Cool. Like it's a good feeling, but at the end of the day, like, $300 really doesn't like dramatically change somebody's life. Maybe it helps cover groceries or whatever, but it's not like, screw you money or anything like that. So, we have learned now that if we were to go back and do it all over again, you can scale and grow so much faster than you could on your own using other people's capital. And in the beginning, it's very scary to do that, because you don't know what you don't know. You're like, how am I going to make sure that I don't lose these people's money? How do I secure that? How do I make sure that we split it equitably? There's a lot of skills that come along with that, but I think that's another point for having a mentor or a coach or somebody who has done it in the past and knows what they're doing and can hold your hand and say, no, we're going to get you there 10 times faster than you could on your own. And that for me has been huge. I wish I could go back and slap myself in the face and say, don't do it this way. That was not the best way to do it. But hindsight is 20/20, of course.
Well, that's it. I mean, I could definitely see how that can correlate. That's not an easy thing for people, like going out and having their hat and asking for some relatives for money or something. How
Right.
would you then apply that and like connect the dots with investors or people that have that extra cash or want to make a good investment that makes it worth their time to do that?
Yeah. So so let me back up. When we first got started, we scaled pretty quickly, but it's because like both my wife and I were working. She was a nurse. I was in IT, like we had pretty good jobs. We had some equity in our house. We had some lines of credit. So we had more resources at our fingertips that I think most people starting out have access to. So we scaled very quickly. In that first year, we bought 12 units in the first 12 months. And after that, I think we were making around $2,500 a month net. So like it was pretty decent income, especially for a young married couple with no kids. But then we ran out of money, and we, at one point, kind of sort of like threw our hands in the air. And we're like, all right, well, I guess this is all we can do for now. Like, I guess there's no other way to scale. There's no other way to buy more properties. And this is what I would go back and tell myself and say, like, there is so much money out there that you don't even realize, whether that's in your like first degree network or your second degree network. So people that that they know, like there's so much money. There's so many people that even just have like $50,000 or $100,000 just sitting there on the sidelines that they don't really know what to do with. They're told to scrimp and save and make sure they have this cushion. But beyond that, they're like, I don't really know what to do with this money. So there are people all around you, that if you have a really good deal, like go and find any deal. If you have a deal in your hand, I promise you that the money will follow, because people are hungry for that. They have these funds. They don't know what to do with them. So partner with them, split it 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30, however you decide to do it. There's money out there. And I wish I had not let that stop me previously.
Interesting. Now, who is the main driver for all of this? Was it you or your wife, or you both collectively made it a date night where you guys were reviewing different properties? Like, how did you end up building this relationship with your wife and your business? Because most of the time people can't say that they can do that with your spouse. So give us some ways that you've been able to do that together.
Yeah. So funny enough, I think that was actually one of the things that we bonded over initially when we first met. So on our very first hike, I think it was like a 3 or 4 hour hike on our first date. And the whole time we were just talking about mortgages and interest rates and what do you like?
Let me back up. You were in Idaho Falls. Where in the world is there a hike? It's flat.
So Idaho Falls actually has a lot of like mountain. It's not as flat as you would think. Yeah. There's a lot of like mountain terrain, lots of trails, lots of waterfalls and streams and stuff. So we've got some places to go. But yeah, we now we joke that we fell in love at first interest rate, just because like that's what we did, the whole hike. We were just like, we were talking about what do you charge your roommates and what do they pay for and how much do you have left over and what are you going to use that for and how are you going to get more and how are you going to build and all this, so we really bonded over that initially as after we got married and, things kind of grew and changed and kids, like, the roles changed, but the end goal didn't. So we still had this goal towards financial freedom and making sure that we were, set up for life and we could live the life that we wanted. But her role in things changed in the sense that she took on a lot more on her plate as far as, just basic housework and keeping the kids and getting their schedules and packing lunches and making sure that I didn't necessarily have to worry about those things as much, because she knew, hey, I know that you're more focused on this. I can handle this side of it. We're going to divide and conquer. And, indirectly, I'm still helping you with our goals. And I think that's 100% held true. And my wife is a rock star. I don't know how she does it, but it does. She takes so much off my plate. And I think indirectly that gets us where we want to be.
Amazing. How long did it take you guys to really get to a point where you got out of that rat race?
Probably 4 years, realistically.
So you both had your day jobs while you guys were building this portfolio part.
We were, yeah. So I would say maybe 3 years. So we really started investing in 2018. My daughter was born right around COVID. And after my daughter was born, my wife quit her W-2 job. And then I still worked my W-2 job for, probably 2 more years. But realistically, I should have quit sooner. I was just a little bit too terrified to take that leap. Even though we had the money in the bank, we were doing just fine. But I think just like mentally, I was like, oh, I've got a family, I've got health insurance, I've got all these things I need to like care for. But yeah, so realistically, I say probably about 4 years.
And this is what you teach, right? You teach students how to do this?
Yeah. So we don't have like a coaching program necessarily. Right now, we actually have a real estate fund, and we're looking for investors. And this is why I say I wish I could go back in time and kind of slap myself, because maybe you're this way. I don't know, but like I have this like, for whatever reason, maybe it's just like a problem with authority. I don't know, but I just like anytime there's a new challenge, I kind of have this like, no, I'm going to figure it out myself mindset, which is so stupid, right? Like that's not the way you should do it. But I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to buy that property. I wanted to figure out how to like be a landlord and handle the contracts and do all the tenants and all these things. But now, knowing what I know now, there are ways to passively invest in real estate, make way more money than you could have otherwise being a landlord, and not have to deal with tenants and toilets and do all these things. And so I wouldn't say that we like teach that necessarily. Like I don't have a coaching program or anything like that, but we do have a real estate investment fund. We raise capital from investors. We pool all that money together, and then we go out and we buy properties and we pay investors just a flat rate. And right now, especially when interest rates are so astronomically high, you really can't find a lot of properties that cash flow. But we can, and we do. We find properties that are very profitable. And so I don't say that to brag, but I wish, like I said, I could go back and just explain to myself, there's a better way to do this. You know, there are people who are really good at this, and there are ways to make a good amount of money without having to do any work.
Yeah. So are you looking for people that just have some extra money, or are you looking for people that just want to more of like diversify their portfolio? Just to give context for people, if they end up following you and have these discussions, is it more wealthier people that you're working, or you have like, you know, a nurse that's wanting to put, you know, a few grand into it? Like how can people and the followers here on the podcast help connect with you and understand a little bit more of that approach?
Yeah, good question. So I would say both. I mean, we'll target anyone who wants to invest with us. Most of the time, though, I wouldn't say that we like work exclusively with really wealthy individuals. Like most people are just like you and I, you know, like they have some retirement funds and they want to diversify, or they're tired of making 4% in a high yield savings account, or maybe they have some CDs, or, you know, something that's just like, it's doing okay, but not amazing. We do have some minimums because we're registered with the SEC. And so we do have like some certain criteria that we have to stick to. So our minimum investment size right now is $50,000. But so, you know, some people listening might think, oh, that's a lot. I don't have that much. And that's okay. Like I remember being at that spot in my life, but life changes really quick, you know, and like in a matter of a year or two, your life can totally transform and you can be in a completely different spot. So, we try to cater to anyone and everyone that we can, but, you know, like I said, we do have those criteria that we have to stick to, but we're here for the long haul. So as things change, come talk to me. I'd love to work with you. And, I will say too, like, if you want to get your hands dirty, I've been there. I've done that. I've done all the things. So if you want help, even just like analyzing the numbers on a property, or looking at, you know, just saying like, is this a good deal? Am I going to lose my shirt on this one? Like, shoot me a message. I'd be happy to help and look it over for you.
It's very interesting, your approach, Bryce, because I think a lot of people know that they need to get into real estate as a part of their portfolio, and your approach to it of just like, hey, don't even have to worry about it. Just invest in a fund that's going to help invest in those properties on your behalf. And that's pretty cool, because there's REITs, right, that people do in the stock market. But I think this one individually that you're doing is probably going to help you have better returns than even a, you know, Fortune 500 type of, you know, fund or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So,
and like, you know, without diving into the weeds too much, like Realty Income, ticker symbol O, if you're familiar with that, that's a very popular REIT out there right now. And I think people have seen, especially with like what's going on with the market, like even though it's a REIT, it still tracks the market pretty closely. Like there have been a lot of dips with that particular REIT. It's a very popular one. we don't really see those fluctuations in the real estate that we do, because we're buying properties that are so significantly undervalued. They're typically 50% of market value. We go in, we fix them up, and then we stabilize them and increase rents and then sell them for profits. And so it's that forced appreciation, it's that forced valuation that they're trying to increase and grow. And that's kind of our unique advantage as, compared to just buying a REIT and letting it sit there. And you don't really have as much like control over it, because you can't, it's not hands-on, it's not physical.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you off the wall question. What is your normal carry? What's the things that you have with you that you bring, your everyday carry? What do you grab? What's the normal thing for Bryce? What's
interesting? This is a good question. I mean, the typical one is phone. Typical one is wallet. That's pretty much it. I don't think I carry anything else besides that. I even used to carry like car keys, and now like my car keys are just on my phone. It's just on an app. So like, it's just like, that's a good question. I've never thought about that. I probably need to be a little bit more.
You're in Idaho. Do you have something strapped with something else there?
I do have a concealed carry in my truck in case we run across a grizzly bear or something. But no, it's pretty standard. Nothing too crazy. But I probably should carry like a cool pocket knife or lighter or something. I don't know. I feel like people have some.
Sometimes people have some unique ones, man. I mean, and that's why I ask. Sometimes it's pretty interesting.
Do you know who Peter McKinnon is? He's big on YouTube. Yeah, so he's like the best example of the everyday carry. He's got the coolest little like trinkets and knives and like all sorts of cool. I'm like, I strive to be like Peter McKinnon because that's so cool.
Hashtag goals.
Yeah. Right.
Cool, man. I appreciate you being on the call with us today and just kind of going over everything. How can people connect with you further?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is Instagram. I think that's probably like where I'm most active. Just at Bryce Matheson, just my first and last name, and I'm pretty active on there. So if anybody wants to reach out or DM me or whatever, like I should be able to get back to you pretty easily. I'm on LinkedIn and a couple other platforms, but yeah, that's probably the best way.
Fantastic. Well, we'll link those up down below so everybody can connect with you further. Again, Bryce, super stoked to have you on the show. Hopefully a lot of the listeners here have heard a lot about real estate. You can get some more connection with Bryce, more about that. And until next time, we will be able to continue to talk about high performance and getting more and more great people on the show. Great to have you on the show, Bryce. And we'll
Thanks for having me.
out from here.
Sounds good.